Hello. Flora and I recorded episode one yesterday. I watched it back just now. It's obviously brilliant. We answered two questions. I think I'm going to divide it in two, and we'll have one now and make the other half into a second episode. So that's what's going on. We have had a question from Alex. Thank you, Alex.
Thank you, Alex. Much appreciated.
Yes, it said professionally, and I like that start. Let's frame it that way. Professionally, what are the three things you're most grateful for? And Flora, do one.
I would say uh people being willing to give advice in a to people being willing to give you advice at all. There's a really key difference for me between making sometimes unsolicited advice feel like exactly the thing that you need and doesn't sort of get your hackles up and being like, why are you giving me advice on this thing that I neither asked for nor need nor require? And actually, but at the end you feel like, no, I really benefited from that. So getting advice in a way that feels you receive in the right way, like at all, just as a thing, I think is something to be grateful for. And obviously the word grateful slightly makes me go ugh, cringe, but I am. Um, and the big bit of it for me would be being in a non-formal setting. I think being given advice that may or may not be about work stuff in a meeting room or in a kind of work environment is only ever going to be understood or unpacked in a certain way. And if you have a bit of a change of environment and they've taken the effort to take you to that place, you're going to listen harder, I would say.
That's interesting. So potentially the same advice in a meeting room would say would be like these are things you're deficient in,
Yeah, I
or
think, yeah.
or over coffee is like, oh, that's useful, thanks.
Yeah, if you need to tell someone something that they might find hard to hear, they're definitely going to take it better, like with a snack and a drink, obviously, and probably not in a meeting room where they probably spend quite a lot of time having a different kind of hard conversation anyway. No?
Yeah, 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 I buy that. I buy that. The do you think are there ways of framing those things that do the same thing that also make it less oppressive?
Like the shit sandwich technique.
Or yeah, I don't know. Or just I'm trying to think about it. Like how like the best advice I've ever had, I think, is probably has been pretty straightforward. Like you're not very good at this. You should get better at that. Not, you
Ju-
know.
just giving it to somebody really, really straight up. So almost baldly, but still coming out quite a kind way. Or brutal. Do you want the plaster to just be ripped straight off?
I guess so, though. Actually, I think a lot of it depends on the relationship you have with that person to start with, doesn't it? It's like, someone you barely know who's
Mm,
like, you need to be taller. It's
yeah.
not helpful.
Bit of a dead
But
end. Yeah.
yeah, yeah, yeah. That's good. Well, it's good. It's good. Um, that's a good thing to be grateful for.
Yeah. What about you? Think,
I mean, I tried to write some things down like off the top of my head, and obviously the first thing I wrote down was PowerPoint.
of course.
Um, and that's half joking, but also I think I'm really lucky, I guess, or grateful for the fact that the thing that it has been a primary way of communicating in my job is something that suits the way I think. Basically, I think that's very fortunate. If we were more of a written, if we was in a world of memos, I don't think I'd be as good at my job as
Love that.
having been in a world of presentations.
It's one of the only things I like the sound of that I like about Amazon is operating solely on a memo basis. I love that.
Do you
Um,
think that's actually true though?
yeah,
Do you?
yeah. I've heard from agencies who may or may not want to be named who work with them, and they don't receive briefs; they receive a memo.
Right.
Um, and I think that's acceptable. As like the only thing that's unacceptable is and I am going to name them, like clients like Samsung who don't brief, who don't give you briefs. That's just they did nothing is the worst case scenario. But I'll take a memo over nothing for sure. And a well written, succinct memo is a glorious thing. Uh,
Yes, yes. I mean, discipline around whatever document. I mean, the thing I like about PowerPoint in some instances is it enforces linearity, like something has to come first,
mm,
and it enforces, to some extent, brevity, depending how you're doing it. Whereas having spent years in a civil service culture, which was primarily a Word document culture, um, it means you don't have to make any decisions. You can just keep adding stuff.
just keep going, and that would just adding another page. I take that
Yeah.
point.
Um, and that is difficult.
We should say at this juncture for people who maybe don't haven't done a deep dive on you is that you've written a book on PowerPoint and that they can read it. Um,
You think
it's just
there are people who don't know that, but people who are listening or watching this who don't know. I suppose that's possibly true.
yeah,
It would be
it
more
could
successful
happen.
than we'd anticipated, but yeah,
I feel it's relevant to mention. It's not
yeah,
just a
yeah.
straightforward plug. There's is one of many reasons why you're grateful for PowerPoint. Um,
Yes, true, true,
yeah,
true. And as exclusively revealed in that book and in every conversation I ever have, the a lot of my early career success was down to knowing how to put images into PowerPoint before anyone else did.
huge.
Um,
And how much advice that you've given people would you say has some resemblance to the phrase make it shorter or just the concept of brevity? Asking as somebody who used to work for you, and I think it's good advice, it's not a dig, just a genuine question, because so much of the way PowerPoint is designed, the way that you think and the way that you get to the point is just cutting out steps, right? It's just making it shorter.
yeah, yeah. I mean, my team at Government Digital Service once told me that they could replace me with a Slack bot that said no T, make it shorter, because
Very
those were the three things I ever said. Um, I mean, that is, yeah, yeah. Because if you, I mean, to be slightly serious, if you not, um, if you make it shorter and still say the thing you wanted to say, it's better. Like, obviously, if you change the meaning of what it is you wanted to say in order to make it shorter, it's probably not. But
it's
um, yeah,
it's it's a very idiosyncratic piece of advice from you to say make it shorter because it sounds on the face of it almost aggressively simplistic and you think has he thought about that, and then actually as a practice and as a command, anybody who has spent any time around large numbers of complicated terms and they know that they have to distill it down, actually make it shorter and make it simpler is one of the reasons why it's there are it's hard. It's hard.
yeah, yeah,
It's like a chief job for a strategist, and sometimes it's really really easier said than done.
yeah.
Um, yeah,
And it's not just hard, sort of the mechanics of it. It's hard culturally. It's hard to um, again. Maybe some of this is probably sort of to do with privilege of like if you like standing up and saying not very much, you have to be quite confident to and quite secure in your status and stuff to be able to stand up and say all right, not very much, or to respond to a request from a client or a document with not very much, um, is intimidating because a lot of presentations are like they're sort of like the blockchain. It's about proof of work. It's not kind of and it's hard for at first blush sometimes for people to see something very short as having lots of work in it, whereas in fact it probably had more work in it than the long thing. But you have to be pretty sure of yourself to to do that. And there's again, I think I'm lucky to have been old enough to have worked in a world of sort of old-fashioned posters where you'd see how hard people would work to get something down to 5 words. because in a digital world, there's always more space. And people just write more or do more or create more or do another one but in a world of sort of 30-second telly and 6 sheets and 48 sheets and stuff, like the core discipline is compression. It's not, it's like getting a lot of stuff into a small amount of stuff. And
Yeah.
I've always found that quite an appealing thing.
Yeah, I mean the practice of sweating an idea, of sweating a concept through a 6 sheet, I think is still something that's
Do we need
done.
to explain what a 6 sheet is for
Oh,
the younger members of the community?
yeah, what? And so it's the size of an out of home execution, a bus stop shelter,
It's
effectively.
bus shelter, isn't it? It's like, yeah.
Um, and that is
Quarter
still
of a
used.
48 sheet? No.
40, wait, hang on. What's the size of the one outside the big Tesco going off out of West London? That's bigger than a 48 sheet, I think.
That might be a 96 or a special build.
I love a special build. Um,
What's your second thing to be grateful for?
I'll just see how to write it down because I'm so ungrateful. Um, oh yeah, this one does sound very serious actually. They're actually all really serious.
You're a
Fact
serious
that,
person, Flora.
yeah, I'm a very serious person. The fact that making odd connections and making a lateral jump and strange analogies and sort of Trojan horsing what couldn't be quite a clunky or functional strategy with a something that seems zhuzhier and perhaps sort of doesn't elevate, but gives a gives a conversation or a point of view for a client. It makes it more palatable because that analogy or that connection or that strange lateral jump. It sort of, in theory, it changes their perspective and it gives the whole thing a bit more energy, even if it's very short lived. The fact that that's encouraged as a job, and being that's quite I'm imagining that's quite an unusual thing. It's certainly something I didn't really encounter in the law, or in the art world. They don't like lateral thinking unless you are a visual artist, really. Um, so the idea that being curious isn't kind of a punishable offense. In fact, it's something to be encouraged. And that curiosity manifesting itself as making odd jumps for a job, I think is really nice and something I'm grateful for. And it's odd. It's a good kind of odd, I think.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, I mean, probably our professional gratitude boils down to being glad that a job that exists that suits slightly odd sets of skills and attitudes and approaches like what we've got.
Yeah, oddness is encouraged, and obviously there's a negative side to that, which is you get pretension and objectionable dress sense and all of that. But you do also have a broad place to carve out a role for yourself, because you can do the specialism thing. It's something we've talked about a lot, the sort of clinging on to the idea of being a generalist in a world of increasing specialism. But I don't know, I think maybe the specialist thing is sort of dying out.
Do you?
uh, yeah, well, maybe I've sort of maybe hearing a few initial death rattles because obviously you can't be a digital planner anymore. Comms planning, certainly massive in the US still, but here quite unusual, unlike on a very, very specific kind of business, which requires a huge amount of it, like for example, discounter grocery retail. But that's a big bit of the gig. But you won't have someone being like, "Hi, I'm a comms planner." You just have a planner who can do comms planning.
Right, right.
Um,
Yeah.
so maybe it's a title thing. Don't know.
I think looking back, I think I sort of was a generalist, but actually I wasn't really. I was like an old school television planner. You know what I mean? It was like actually quite specialized. I like it was, make 2 TV commercials every 10 years, kind of a job. But I don't know.
Your second one?
Um, Seems a bit odd to say, but Widening Kennedy. I'm just very grateful that a place existed that wanted what I did.
Mhm.
Um, and I probably had like what, like a 20-year career in advertising. About 10 years of that was at Wyden, and that was the only time I was any good at my job. Um, and it's one of those one of the interesting things you find when you get to my sort of stage of career is people go, "Oh, you've done tremendous things," and you kind of, "I've done a lot of terrible things," but no one remembers. Well, I suspect some people remember, but it doesn't get talked about. But yeah, like half of my career was a disaster, but the half that wasn't was at Wyden, and it's that thing of oddness, and the things that I liked to do and was good at was the stuff they wanted. And I'm really grateful that somewhere that wanted that existed and paid me, and I was able to be successful um, doing doing stuff that I was good at and not doing stuff I wasn't good at. Because I've never been good at research. I hate it. I've never been good at groups. Like there's loads of stuff you're supposed to do as a planner that I just didn't have to do. Um, and that was like a very rare privilege, and still made good work, and yeah, very grateful for that.
Do you really hate groups? Really? Even though they're anarchic and weird and all of that, you don't like the kind of slightly unpredictable quality?
I could imagine liking that, but the age of, or maybe it was the places I worked and the time I did it and all that kind of stuff. But I rarely worked anywhere that moderated its own stuff. So you were always behind a window. You were always with the client, and someone else was moderating the groups, and the job became manipulating the client's perception of the group.
Yeah.
Like I found a lot of what planning was in that kind of thing was like going to research in order to make sure that the client, because you were trying, it was largely trying to get work through groups. That
Mm.
was the skill that you learned. It's
But
like
yeah,
how to get work through groups, and that's not much fun, you know. And it was horrible. I didn't like doing that. And you'd be there going, "Oh, they like that bit, didn't they? They like that." Well, they always say they don't like it, but what they mean is they like it. It's kind of,
I mean, the without wishing to, throw the whole discipline under the bus, it is also the whole the manipulation of the client in those kind of scenarios. You could say that someone from account management should be there sort of helping out a bit with that while you're concentrating on, but don't want to be a stickler for that. The the other thing that's really thrown the whole model off for me is post COVID. Obviously, it's a lot cheaper to still do Zoom research, and you'll be told you need to man mark this client, and you're on a Zoom like chat link. You're not in a room with them going, interesting. You'll have heard that they say that they hate it, but what they mean is, and you're doing that, and it obviously doesn't work on a chat window when they're at home having, just dealt with their kids or whatever, and they're just trying to concentrate and they've got a million things going on. You're not the voice in their ear anymore. They're actually just trying to hear what the people at the other end of the computer are saying, which has
yeah,
completely changed the dynamic.
yeah, yeah. God,
And
I haven't done that, but I can imagine that would be. And actually, we would do not often, but we would occasionally do that kind of research at Wyden. But because one of Dan Wyden's very firm rules was no pre-testing, um, it would only ever be with work. You would show people ads, and if you showed people ads, they say really interesting things that you didn't expect,
yeah, yeah.
which is great. Like we'd show people a bunch of ads, and they'd say this, and you go, "Oh my God!" Like they think that. Well, that's useful. We could do something with that. Um, that kind of stuff. You know, that would be great. But the the fakeness of not just the weird fake science of pre-testing, but the way it makes the relationship weird.
Yeah,
Um, that I,
yeah.
that I just wasn't very good at that. You know. Um,
I've never been opposed to like there's nothing wrong with the argument that pre-testing is essentially balls. And like in it, I don't understand LinkedIn at all. And if somebody who's listening, I mean, who isn't like related to one of us, could explain to us via a voice note what LinkedIn, how it works, we'd be so grateful, and we could talk about it. But it seems to come up like along with all the humble bragging and stuff. People, the debate against pre-testing is still like going on. Like specifically planners that I think both of us have worked with occasionally say like this is bollocks. It's like no one's no one's like disagreeing with that, but the fact is it's still happening and it
Yeah.
gets reskinned, and sometimes it's interesting and new and shiny, and it kind of you can have a slightly different way into the conversation, like all the system one stuff, but it is still ultimately creating that dynamic that you've just spoken about where you're having to kind of strong arm a client into making a decision when you're also trying to get them to like trust you ultimately to make a jump and to go, this is a good idea. And because it's a creative leap, it's going to come down to you are going to make a leap of faith, and you're just going to have to trust us when we say it's good and it's the right thing to do. And it's weird and hard trying to do that while also being like, this is what this red traffic light means or doesn't mean for your next performance review.
And it's
Um,
it's a weird thing that advertising does, I think, in that I guess probably some other industries do similar stuff. I saw I did a project once with Wyden Kennedy Amsterdam, working with a very famous architect who was designing a or presenting recommendations to a client for a building for like a £300 million building kind of thing. And he effectively said, like, showed them a model and said, "Look, it is beautiful," and that was it. Like
that was the pitch.
that was the pitch, and that was the rationale. Obviously, it had to fit certain functional like you had to be able to get people in and out of it, and it had to keep
In
the
a
rain
fire.
off
Yeah.
and stuff. Yeah, not be on fire. But but it was broadly that. It wasn't like we've shown this model to some people and they like it or um, and I I think I remember hearing Hegarty once talking about like that sort of surrender to that there was clearly a phase where advertising thought it could become a science and that
Mm.
that would be economically useful if like it was no longer about opinion and trust and persuasion and became scientific. And I mean that's probably a very long history actually if you read the sort of Feldwick stuff. But it never has been. And um, again, one of the reasons I like Wyden is we didn't pretend that it was a science or that and it creates other issues because people think what you would therefore do is like force the work through somehow. Like, here's the work, you must buy it. It would be like, here's the work, do you like it? If you don't, we'll do something else. There are 1,000 ideas out there.
Mm.
We can just have more ideas. It's better than trying to scientifically kind of. I mean,
Yeah.
that was the theory.
I guess the do you like it thing is something I've been thinking a bit more about because it's an increasing kind of venting topic for some people about like tr marketing knowledge and training in clients. And if you get people, and as if you had lots of people leaving agencies and going client side, that's great because they can answer the question, do you like it? And they trust their answer. But since since Unilever like 15 years ago, I haven't encountered that many marketing professionals who will who are confident in their ability to say in a creative review, I like it or I don't like it, and let me tell you why, and not just checking it against the brief, like like a trained gut, for want of a better phrase. And Unilever were really good at that back in the day, and I hope they still are. I don't know. I don't know if they still invest in that training, but there's a bit of a slice missing in how like work is being assessed on that side. So we can keep selling it in the same way and finding more and more sophisticated techniques in order to say with fake science and stuff and making it sound really legit. Um, but if you've got some people in the room who aren't confident in their ability to answer, I like it or I don't like it, and here's why. Like you're in that's a really difficult. You just can't get anywhere. And then they go, can we take it away? We need to align and we need to tell you what we think about it. And I have like a lot of these reviews like all the time. And there's normally one person on the call who says, "That was great, thank you. I like Route One because," and we're all so like pleased afterwards. And if it's the most senior client, great. And we're like, "Oh, it looks like it's number one then." And then we're all kind of cracking on. But if they just go kind of, "Can we get back to you?" You're like, "Was it all shit? Was it all wrong? Can anybody like why can't they just say what they think?"
It's
Um,
yeah. I mean, having been both sides of the, let's say it's a fence, the it's hard, and some of it is. I mean, if you're an agency, you just do more of that. Right? You spend a lot of time basically saying I like that or I don't like that in one way or another, and you get pretty blasé about doing it or good at it or both or whatever. But if you're again, I suspect more so these days, if you're the average client, you just don't do that a lot.
it's a small part of your day. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
especially with a big ticket. So there's probably more stuff where you don't really have to do that. It's sort of programmatic, and we'll chuck it out and we'll see. Like no one has to decide if it's good or not, right? It just sort of either works or it won't. Blah blah blah. But when you suddenly confronted with having to do like a big like something you might have to print or something you're going to put on TV, that's a real um what one way door, whatever Amazon says. Like you have to decide, and that's it. That's pretty hard, especially if you don't do it a lot. Um, that's again, that was I think one of the. This is going to sound like a sort of peon, is that the word? To widen, but one of the reasons, particularly the Nike team, were good there is they just made loads and loads of work. I mean, in the sort of late '90s when I was there, it was like I don't know, 40 or 50 television commercials a year,
It's a lot.
so you just get good at it. It's not, and that was a real difference to working in the UK, where like on the average big brand, you might make two a year, and hence planning, hence the invention of planning. It's like, A, we've got to have something to bill the client for all year, and B, we need more certainty because we're only going to make these two things. They better be good. Um, Rather than a world which was more typical then, I think, of US big brands. It was just always making stuff. So we'll just
Yeah.
make something else.
Was
Um,
it was there you told me once about I don't know if it was a film archive guy or pair of guys or some music guys. They were just in a room and they just had it all and they could just access like if you were like we need this kind of track. I
yeah,
can't
yeah, yeah,
was it music or was it like
yeah,
archival footage? Because obviously that was like the Nike like
yeah.
methodology and they could just
That
make
that was again. It's I mean that's not a thing anymore. But
no.
in the film library at Wyden or the video library, they just had tons and tons of stuff. Like every sports video, loads of movies, skate videos, all that kind of stuff. So, and this was before, this was web, pre being able to get whatever footage you wanted. Um, and so one of the weird things that, well, not weird things, but one of the things they used to do is they would make uh, videos for the Nike sales conferences. So they'd make films before a shoe went on sale. So not the ad, but like the promotional film that would get shown to the,
Mood film. It's a
yeah, the
sizzle
mood film
for
that
a
would
shoe.
get shown to the industry, blah, blah,
Yeah.
blah. Because it was private, they could use any piece of music they wanted,
Yeah.
any bit of footage they wanted, and it didn't really have to have an idea much. It was like edit some stuff together, stick the Air Force One at the end of it, get the sales people excited. That was sort of the brief, and they did that a lot, and they were very very good at it. And after a while, people were like, "Can we just put that on television?" And, that's where you get the I suspect I mean I definitely wasn't around, but that's where I suspect you go, well, can we use Revolution by the Beatles, because that's what we used and then the creative idea is paying enough money to use Revolution by the Beatles because it will be worth it, or Instant Karma, or a lot of their things were the willingness to do stuff that were basically mood videos, which and the creatives in the UK, I remember hating that because there wasn't an idea. Yeah, yeah, but it's still good, isn't it? Yeah. So
It's
yeah, there was that just resource that was made that happen.
it's it's so pleasing, the idea of being able to have it tangibly and all in one place. And obviously digitally you can replicate that feeling, but the
Mm,
idea of having the physical stuff in front of you and being like, we have the means literally tangibly, palpably within this room in order to make a really, really fun thing. And I guess those films also sound like, I don't know if it's something that people would feel good about or as if it's a slightly dirty secret. They may not have an idea, but they're obviously entertaining. They are just pure entertainment.
yeah,
And that
yeah,
some people don't feel good about saying that that's like, one of the things that ads are meant to do. Um, and everybody has been in a pitch or multiple pitches at some point where a mood film with a manifesto or not and the right music will provoke a very emotional response with a client. And there's just that moment like before all the reality kicks in where they go, oh, we can't make that, the licensing's too much for that, where they're really into it. They're really into it and you see
yeah,
how much they're into it and you're like, well, we've done something right, that's great.
yeah,
It,
yeah,
and it's a good moment in what can be quite a frustrating process.
yeah. Well, I mean, we did quite a few pitches where everyone knew, like, we'd present the work, show the work, we'd do the mood film, and then Dan would read out the manifesto, and the client would cry.
Yeah, yeah. So
We've probably got this, you know.
it's weird when that's a good thing, but yeah, it's
Yeah,
can be quite good when the client cries. Yeah.
yeah, yeah, yeah. We're not getting through these very
No, no, we're not.
quickly,
We're
are
not.
we?
Shall I do my third one?
Yeah, go.
Um, Very somber start. Graduating just before the 2008 crash meant people had to kind of redefine what a career looked like because everyone was like, well, I'm broke and I need a job. So everybody in my kind of cohort had loads of job for the sake of being a job, full starts, um, you know, part time, whatever, things that went nowhere, but we just gave them an experience or whatever. And so you had a healthy sense of a job for a sense of a paycheck. There was no judgment about having a blind alley, and I think it sort of arguably set all of our lot up quite well for then the devastating economic reality that you're going to be working until you're 75, where you're like, well, I guess I'll have a few different kinds of career then, because it turns out life is long and it can all go sort of to pot. And for me, it really took the pressure off and it made being broke in London a bit less scary because you were surrounded by people who were like, yeah, I'm a bike courier while I'm trying to do X. And there wasn't any judgment and it wasn't like, oh, you had to have these four amazing stratospheric careers. And obviously it gets to the point, after a certain amount of time where you're like, well, are you going somewhere? Do you like it? Is there a sort of path of progression you can track? Mortgages, all that kind of shit. But there was a sort of point where there wasn't any pressure. There was just a way of working and having, I suppose, a sort of enforced upon you an oddly good sense of work-life balance by dint of the fact that all the jobs, just take any job, just take the
Right.
first job you
Yeah, yeah,
possibly
yeah, yeah.
could.
So was that the when you started doing the art stuff and then law and then that was not
Yeah,
your
I
advertising
just did.
career?
I
Or
just did. I did while I was paying for law school. I worked in a scribbler. I worked in loads of pubs. I did loads of tutoring. I was doing research for a guy writing a book about his ancestor. I did loads and loads of weird jobs, and then kind of fell into the art thing because I could do it on the side of other stuff. And yeah, didn't even discover what planning was until I had had what felt like a million jobs. None of them had gone anywhere, but I also that didn't bother me. I remember their feeling in conversations with people. They're like, "You did that, and then you're doing that, and then you're doing that," and I could feel, oh, judgment's not far away, but it also didn't really bother me.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
Did you think was planning just like another punt?
it
And
was. It was a bit of a punt in that I went back to my university career service and was like, I'm doing jobs for the sake of a job. and I had met my now husband, who unfortunately has an excellent work ethic, and he was like, I feel like you're not really into what you're doing, and that's okay, but have you thought about doing something that you're into doing? And I was like, that sounds like a bit of an affectation, but okay. And then went to my career service and was like, have I aged out? And they were like, no. And then they let me, then I met loads of alums, and one of them was a planner. And as soon as they just told me what the job was, I was like, oh, yeah, that sounds great.
Yeah, yeah,
But yeah, that wasn't until I was 27. So I'd graduated like 6 years before. Yeah. So
yeah.
I'm grateful,
That's probably
grateful for the financial crisis in a way.
that's nice. I mean, that's classic, gratitude stuff, isn't it? Finding a really terrible thing and being grateful for it is like what all the podcasts say you should
Or
do.
is it? Is it? Are we
Yeah,
doing all the Great,
yeah.
great,
So
great.
the podcast gods will shine on us, I think,
Oh,
for this.
excellent.
Um, I don't think I have a third one.
Okay. Well, you can be
I could
grateful for
probably
just
come up with one, couldn't I? But that would be wrong. That would be wrong. You keep going.
I'm only grateful for three things. I'm not gonna, I'm not gonna do the like thanking, because there's when you say advice, like implicit in that are all the loads and loads of people who have helped you out.
Yeah, yeah,
So
yeah,
that's all the mentoring and nice bosses and all of that stuff is like, for me, it's all wrapped up in that. Um,
yeah. Nice. It's a good catch-all kind of. And then if someone says later on, you didn't mention me, you'd be like, well, you were in that
yeah,
bit. Yeah,
yeah,
very good.
you were a nice boss, and you know
Yeah.
that about yourself. Yeah,
Whereas I've been quite binary. Either you worked at Wieden and Kennedy,
or you didn't.
or you didn't, and I'm not grateful for you if you you didn't, or you invented if you're Bob Gaskins and you invented PowerPoint, then hurrah, thank you. But otherwise, not
Such a
from.
good name, Bob Gaskins.
Yeah,
We
yeah,
appreciate you.